Hello and welcome to this session on cloud extensibility, where we focus on your Atlassian cloud your way. We'll talk about some of the exciting new ways in which you can take our products and make them uniquely yours. My name is Martin Sontinger. I'm the head of product for ecosystem here at Atlassian. I'm so passionate about this topic because I truly believe there is no one-size-fits-all tech when it comes to our everyday life and our everyday tools. We just love to customize, whether that's super practical DIY solutions around the house, for example, to shave off a few minutes from your daily bathroom routine, or keep your pets a little bit more happy. Or, well, less practical stuff, like this keyboard without key labels, because why not play a game of memory when you type that next Confluence page? Or fun stuff, like these homemade Heelys with real skateboard wheels. Hello, broken legs. Or, speaking of custom wheels, making your favorite product work when your requirements are just a bit different. Like this Tesla with no tracks fitted on it. People really do take their customizations to the extreme, whether it's for convenience and efficiency, or simply fun and fame. It's no surprise then that in working with hundreds of thousands of customers across the world, we've observed that this idea absolutely holds true for teams as well. There is also no one-size-fits-all approach to how teams function. Unique teams have unique ways of working. This means the tools they use to drive innovation and collaboration need to be flexible enough to meet their needs. At Atlassian, our products have been open and extensible from day one. In fact, we've launched our first plugin framework in 2004, more than 30,000 feet in the air. True story. Our co-founder Mike wrote the first version of this framework on a long flight from Sydney to Europe. This framework enabled passionate technical users and system integrators to extend Atlassian products themselves. So open is well and truly in our DNA. And as a result, more than 60% of our JIRA and Confluence customers across deployment options use apps from the marketplace. And as we look towards our largest customers, this number is well over 80%. We've seen hundreds of thousands of JIRAs, and no two JIRAs are alike. But let's talk about cloud specifically. I'm sure you've heard about Atlassian's commitment to making cloud the best Atlassian experience for all types of teams. This cloud promise is a commitment that goes beyond product features and user experiences, privacy, security, and scale, which is a lot. However, in talking to many of you about this cloud promise, there's one hard question I do get asked a lot. Isn't cloud less flexible, less extensible? The simple fact is, for security, scalability, and many other reasons, the way cloud products can be extended will always be different to server. But there's absolutely no reason different must mean less. In fact, we'll see throughout this talk that cloud technology opens up exciting new possibilities for us. This means our cloud promise extends into our entire ecosystem. Working alongside our partners, we're committed to bringing you the most extensible and highly customizable experiences in the cloud. This is a journey we're on together. So let's take a closer look where we're at and what's coming next. We know with Atlassian products, you expect three things. You need to extend product functionality with a broad choice of ready-to-use apps. You need to integrate our cloud with products your teams use daily, and you need to customize with unique capabilities that boost your team's productivity. And this is exactly what we're delivering with our recent cloud investments. So let's take a closer look. When it comes to extending our products to new use cases, you have the Atlassian Marketplace at your fingertips. Today, we offer cloud customers more than 1,000 apps and integrations through our marketplace that extend use case functionality such as time tracking, test management, diagramming, automation, and many, many more. And this number is growing rapidly. In 2019 alone, we've added more than 275 new cloud apps to our marketplace. That's a little more than an app every business day. Think about that. By the time you have that morning coffee, a new cloud app has been published to the Atlassian Marketplace. And that includes some of our most popular server apps that now have cloud versions available. Since last year, this includes Inside Asset Management, JIRA Workflow Toolbox, JSU Automation, Structure, and many, many more. These apps have thousands of downloads, so we know many of you have been eagerly waiting for them to come to cloud, and vendors keep building out their features in cloud as we speak. Now that more and more of your favorite apps are on cloud, many of you have asked us for help to plan their migration journey. To make that easier, I'm excited to share we now have a new tool to assess your apps for migration. Built straight into our migration assistant, we'll display how frequently apps are being used by your teams, whether there's a cloud version available, and if it has a migration path. App assessment is available for Confluence today and will be available for JIRA Cloud Migration Assistant later this year, alongside with further migration tools for app data. No conversation about cloud is complete without talking about security. In the spirit of being an open company, Atlassian publishes transparent reports of our internal security practices as well as real-time view of our platform roadmap. This importance of trust and security also extends to our ecosystem. To achieve that, we have a dedicated security operations team at Atlassian focusing solely on app security. We're overhauling our security program to ensure marketplace partners and apps meet and exceed customer security expectations consistently, and are supporting vendors with tooling and education. One program I'm particularly excited by is our bug bounty program. For those unfamiliar, a bug bounty is a powerful way to help detect vulnerabilities in applications and services through crowdsourcing a talented pool of security researchers that, well, essentially try and break into your apps and report vulnerabilities in the process so that those can be fixed before an actual malicious actor finds them. Many of our most popular partners are already participating, and we're onboarding more and more partners every month. Next, let's talk about integrations. Many of you are using various SaaS products every day to accomplish your work. In fact, the average employee now relies on about 10 apps across different departments, from engineering and design to marketing, sales, HR, and finance. Our goal is to make sure you have the best possible experience when working with Atlassian and other SaaS tools. There's so many new integrations to showcase, I could only pick up a handful of highlights. Like this new integration between Trello and Dropbox. You can easily attach files to Trello cards or create a new Trello card in Dropbox. The file preview gives you more context upfront, and bonus, it actually supports all Dropbox file formats, including applications that you may not even have installed. So the next time that you need to make sure your product team has the latest wireframes, just share that file from Dropbox onto your Trello board. For developers, we've built deep integrations with VS Code. Let's say you're coding away, building something awesome, when you spot an issue in the code. Rather than leaving what you're doing, opening a new tab and navigating to JIRA, you can now create a new JIRA issue directly from within your IDE. The JIRA issue contains all common issue attributes. You can even add comments straight from VS Code to give more context or discuss potential solutions. To make it even more contextual, you can also select a piece of code and create a JIRA issue, which will send a copy of the code to the issue. Or type a quick command //to-do in the code comments and be prompted to create a JIRA issue. How cool is that? Once you're ready to start working on an issue, all you have to do is click Start and the issue transitions in JIRA. In this case, the issue automatically transitions to in progress, creates a Bitbucket branch, and checks out the branch locally. So you can just start coding right away. Then, when you're ready to make changes to the file and commit, if you specified the issue key, JIRA will know this commit is for that particular issue, and all information is linked together. We have a team of engineers dedicated to building these awesome integrations alongside our partners at Slack, Google, and Microsoft, just to name a few. So you can expect to see continued investment in these areas as we deepen our partnerships and focus on building tighter integrations that truly unlock productivity. But we also know sometimes teams just have unique needs that go beyond what's readily available in the marketplace. Therefore, it's crucial to us customers have the power to easily create their own private custom apps for their teams. It turns out we all have been building a lot of these apps. Did you know that for each publicly available app in our marketplace, there are about 7 times as many private apps in use by our customers? Let me introduce you to a few examples. Meet Raju Kadam. Raju has built his career around automating Atlassian products for enterprises. He's been managing Atlassian applications since 2005 and has developed custom apps, APIs, and plugins to help with things like workflow automation, employee reviews, custom analytics, and more for companies such as Cisco, Pandora, and most recently, Tesla. He's now bringing his expertise to the team at Nuro, who are powering autonomous vehicles for transporting goods. While at Cisco, Raju created custom space user management to help mitigate the huge influx of JIRA and Confluence access requests that came with explosive growth of the company. Like Raju, Rob Leonard and Al Johnson are engineers who modify Atlassian products to their team's unique way of working. They're on a tools management team at Charter Communications. Charter has grown, and fast. In 3 years, they went from 6,000 users on Atlassian products to about 40,000. They were able to scale JIRA and Confluence to meet the demands of this incredible growth by customizing it. For JIRA, they created a custom app that lets teams track how much time an issue spends in each workflow stage, allowing them to identify bottlenecks in their processes. For Confluence, they created a number of customizations that help teams manage their content, including an advanced labeling system and the ability for teams to create a custom glossary for each space. This ensures that everyone who has access to Confluence, including full-time employees, contractors, and vendors, have access to the right information at the right time. In addition to Raju, Rob, and Al, thousands of you have molded and shaped our products in ways we never imagined possible, and have built very successful careers alongside. But as the industry shifts to cloud, you might be wondering, How can you achieve the same success you had customizing Atlassian server products on cloud? And how do you even get started building for cloud? Well, frankly, it isn't easy. You need to find a hosting provider, you need to provision compute and storage. Then you need to actively monitor and maintain that infrastructure. You need to write the application logic and make sure it's scalable and performant. You need to choose a front-end stack and figure out how your app works across different devices. You need to take care of data privacy, fun stuff like GDPR, security, etc. And only then, finally, you get to write the actual business logic of your app. It's safe to say, you need to be quite an expert in modern cloud development today to achieve that. So we went back to the drawing board and asked ourselves, how could we truly simplify this? And not just a little bit better. I mean, radically easier. What if we could spare you from writing all this amount of code, and instead Atlassian takes care of the majority of this work for you? What if it took so little coding that a simple yet production-ready app could be written with code that fits the character limit of a tweet? Well, it turns out these 10 lines of code you see on the screen right now actually make for a functioning app for Confluence Cloud. And here's this app in production. It's called Dad Jokes. Just use the / command. We can select Dad Jokes to insert it, and boom, this page is immediately 500% more fun. It doesn't always have to be a critical workflow app. The coolest thing about this app isn't the cheesy punchlines that come with it. It's the fact that this app wasn't written by one of our engineers. It was written by a product analyst with limited coding experience. So, how was that possible? By leveraging our brand new cloud development platform, Forge. Forge lets you go from idea to active app usage in a day, heck, even a couple of hours. It includes 3 primary components. Number 1, hosted and secure infrastructure, meaning we host your apps for you. You heard that right. Atlassian will host your cloud apps. Number 2, a streamlined DevOps experience powered by the intuitive Forge command line interface and Bitbucket pipelines. And number 3, an easy-to-use UI language, known as Forge UI. We're in the early stages of development, but we're excited to share what's possible today with Forge and what you can expect in the future. To tell you all about that, we'll swap seats with Tim Patterson, our lead engineer on Forge, to give you all the details. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Martin. Now, this is Atlassian's first remote summit, and it's also the first summit that we've talked about Forge, which has been a bit of a secret project that we've been running here at Atlassian. Now, just over a year ago, my team was given a blank slate to prototype a new model for our cloud ecosystem, and to rethink how we make the in-house developer successful with Atlassian's cloud products. Now, that prototype was received well internally and by our developer community when we showcased it at our developer conference, Atlas Camp. And now, my team is busy iterating on that platform. Now, Forge has been in beta for a few months, and we want to take this opportunity to show off some of the truly impressive apps that we've seen built in this short period of time. But first, let's dive into how the platform works. Now, as Martin said, for the first time, Atlassian is moving into the hosting space for both your app code and your app data. Now, there are a few different ways to host code. Some platforms give you a virtual machine that you can configure and deploy applications and services onto. Other platforms let you deploy one or more Docker containers onto them to run your apps. However, for Forge, we decided on a FAZ platform, which stands for Functions as a Service. FAZ platforms are a little different to other hosting approaches, because instead of deploying an entire web application, you deploy a collection of functions that are effectively run inside a service that Atlassian provides. This means you sacrifice a little bit of flexibility in terms of what technologies you can use, but it makes your job as a developer far simpler. Now, FAZ is an exciting and relatively recent advance in cloud computing. So let's talk a little bit about why we chose a FAZ model for Forge. Forge, like almost all Atlassian services, is built on top of Amazon Web Services. During the prototyping phase, we evaluated a number of different approaches, including a Kubernetes-based platform. But Amazon's FAZ offering, AWS Lambda, best suited our needs. Now, fortunately, we have an excellent technology partnership with Amazon and have been supported by deep engineering engagement throughout the project. Since we kicked off Forge, we've been engaged in technology previews for new Lambda features, and we have an annual technology summit to bring Atlassian and AWS senior engineers together. As a result of this partnership, Forge developers get the best-in-class innovation from 2 leading SaaS vendors. Speaking of AWS, you may have heard this famous quote from Amazon's CTO, Dr. Werner Vogels, in 2006. "You build it, you run it." Now, Werner was referring to developers getting more involved in operating the services that they build, a practice that we now know today as DevOps. However, the feedback that we get from developers building on the Atlassian platform is that they're less interested in the nuts and bolts of how an app works, and are much more interested in providing business value to their teams. So we figured, what's better than you build it, you run it? How about you build it, Atlassian runs it? Our vision is that Forge takes care of all the nitty-gritty implementation details so you can customize your Atlassian tools with minimal effort. Now, the first step in this vision is hosting. Forge moves apps from your own infrastructure to running apps inside our cloud. And because we run your apps, you don't have to worry about provisioning, networking, security, patching, and all those other operational aspects of just keeping a web application running. Forge functions run on similar infrastructure to the rest of Atlassian's services and have the same high standards of security and reliability that you expect from an Atlassian product. We're also working on some sophisticated data egress and monitoring tools to give you visibility and control over what data apps work with, and where that data goes. You also don't have to worry about scalability. When you deploy a Forge function, you're really deploying a blueprint of your app, rather than a piece of infrastructure. The Forge platform instantly scales your app up and down to match your users' demands, without you having to configure anything. Forge functions also run inside Atlassian's cloud, so your apps have quick and reliable access to our product and platform APIs. However, though they run close to the products, Forge apps actually run in their own isolated environment. Unlike Atlassian's server products, where a misbehaving plugin can impact the stability or performance of your product, a poorly written Forge app can't seriously impact the core product experience. But luckily, it's difficult to poorly write a Forge app. This is because Forge apps are composed of functions, and we can inject useful helpers directly into your app code and control how your code runs. This means that Forge can manage traditionally complex tasks like data storage or authentication or secrets management for you, which means you can write substantially less code on Forge when compared to Atlassian Connect or Atlassian Server plugins to solve the same business problems. And we didn't stop at simplifying how you write code. Forge also includes a powerful DevOps toolchain for developing and operating your apps. The Forge command line interface allows you to quickly create apps from scratch or remix apps from a library of useful templates. Once created, you can deploy apps onto the Forge platform with a single command, or push your Forge app to a Bitbucket repository to have your app continuously tested and deployed with Bitbucket pipelines. Once deployed, you can observe your app using Forge's automatic logging stack, and even debug your app live on your Atlassian site from your local machine using Forge tunnels. But enough talk. Now that you know how the Forge platform works, Let's see it in action. Forge currently allows you to create custom user experiences in both JIRA issues and Confluence blogs and pages. It also supports some nifty platform features that allow you to build product automations, as well as integrations with third-party tools and services. Let's take a look at how you can use Forge to enhance the #1 page across all Atlassian products, the JIRA issue view. Now, many of our customers have offices around the world, and in some cases hire team members who don't share a common language. One Atlassian customer, who has engineers in both Japan and South Korea, commonly has to translate documents and conversations back and forth between Japanese and Korean. So let's jump out of our slides for a second and look at a live demo of an app that solves exactly this problem. So let's jump over to our browser. Here we've got an issue that's been filed in Japanese. You can see a few English words in there, which makes me think it's something to do with a popular web-scale database, MongoDB. Now, down the bottom here, you'll see this little panel labeled Translate with a couple of buttons in it. This panel is actually a Forge app that allows me to translate the issue's summary and description on the fly. So let's press this button labeled with Korean text and see what happens. There we go. The issue is now translated into Korean, which happens to be another language that I don't speak. So let's go and modify the Forge app to add an English button so I can read it. So we'll jump over to my terminal where I've got a local copy of the app's source code checked out. And we'll open it in Visual Studio Code, which is my favorite IDE for writing JavaScript, partly because of that awesome JIRA integration that Martin showed off earlier. Here's the code that's implementing our issue translation panel. Now, there's a few things going on here. You can see that it's fetching some data from the JIRA REST API, including the issue's summary and description. And then it's passing that to the Azure Text Translate API. And then it's updating the user interface with the translated value from that response. Now, if we scroll down a little bit further, you can see where our UI is being declared. Forge user interfaces are declared in a declarative markup language called Forge UI. Forge UI lets you build apps that feel like a native part of the product in just a few lines of code. So what we're going to do here is copy one of the existing buttons and update the button text to have a little Union Jack instead of a South Korean flag. And we'll change the button text to say English. And then we'll call that same set language routine, but we'll pass through the English language code instead of Korean. Now, if we pop back over to our terminal, we can run the Forge deploy command to deploy our app to the Forge platform. And if we wait a few seconds, our app will be packaged up, uploaded to Forge, validated, and then deployed into our development environment. Now we can switch back to JIRA and refresh the page. And hopefully we should have another little button appear in that translate panel. Woohoo! All right, let's press it. Okay. Now we can see that this issue was actually asking us to upgrade the version of MongoDB that we're running in our service, and gives us a few pointers about how to execute that task smoothly. But more importantly, I hope I've demonstrated that it's super easy to modify Forge apps and deploy them in just a couple of minutes. Now let's jump back into the slides and look at another example. This time, we'll build an app using a popular extension point for customizing how issues transition through a JIRA workflow. It's called a JIRA Workflow Validator. And this time, we're going to be solving a problem that we're facing in the Forge team at Atlassian. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Forge is in beta at the moment, and we're following a highly iterative and agile approach to development. This means we're working closely with our ecosystem developers to prioritize Forge features that will best enable them to build apps that are useful for their teams. And of course, we're using JIRA to track that work. Sometimes, when high priority feedback comes in mid-sprint, we'll prioritize working on that over a lower priority issue that we've already started on. And to some extent, that's fine. That's agile. But sometimes we can get a bit distracted chasing new feature requests. We'll say to ourselves, hey, that'll be a quick fix. I'll come back to that issue that I was just working on a little bit later. Which means that sometimes we can end up at the end of the sprint with lots of JIRA tickets marked in progress, when in fact, a bunch of them have stalled or been deprioritized. This makes it hard to understand what the team is actually working on and when features are going to ship. Now, I'm sure many of you in the audience would point out that JIRA has a neat feature called column constraints that lets me turn the column red if it has too many issues in it. Now, column constraints are pretty cool, but they block the whole team rather than an individual dev who's maybe taking on too much work. So let's use Forge to create a more sophisticated workflow rule that prevents any individual user from having too much work in progress. So let's jump out of our slides again and build an app together. So let's pop over to our browser again. Here's the board that we just saw in that example. And just to prove there's no tricks up my sleeve, let's try dragging a bunch to in progress. And you can see that those column constraints have turned the column red. Let's transition them back and then build our validator. So let's jump back into the terminal and pop over to another tab where I have the source code for another app checked out. So let's open this in our IDE. Now you'll see here a much simpler Forge function with very little code. This is a validator function. The contract for a validator is it gets past an issue and a transition object representing the transition that a user is attempting to execute. The validator then returns true if the transition is allowed, or false if it wants to block the transition. Now this is a fairly simple contract, but you can build all sorts of sophisticated workflows that check for field values or integrate with third-party systems, or enforce all sorts of other conditions on your workflow. In our case, we're going to need to get a little bit more information about the issue to determine whether the user who's assigned to it has too much work already in progress. So we're going to use this API object that's injected into our function to make a request to the JIRA REST API. The API object handles tenant selection and authentication for us, making it easy to get the data that we need. In this case, we need the assignee and the project from the issue. So we'll just assign that to a variable and extract out the fields that we need from that response. All right, now seems like a reasonable time to test that our app is actually working. So let's log out those field values. Now I'm going to jump back into my terminal here, but instead of running forge deploy, we're going to run the forge tunnel command. Tunneling means that instead of the request being passed to a forge function that's deployed in the Atlassian cloud, instead, the request comes to a function running in a Docker container on your local computer. This gives you a nice, tight dev loop for debugging and iteratively developing your apps. So if we pop over to JIRA, let's transition an issue to test out our app. Oops. Looks like we've got a bug. So if we pop back over to terminal, you'll see that I've fat-fingered the name of a function. So let's just correct that, log instead of lof. And if we pop back to our terminal, you'll see that it's instantly detected the change and reloaded our code. So if we head back to JIRA, we can close that error message and try transitioning it again. Great, no errors this time. And if we pop back to our terminal, you'll see that it's printed out a JSON object, which represents the assignee and the project of the issue, if you look closely. So now let's pop back to our IDE again. And now we're going to construct a JQL query using these values. So we want to get a set of issues that are assigned to this particular user. And we want to only fetch issues that are in this particular project. And we want to only grab issues that are currently in progress so we can see if they've taken on too much work. So now we're going to use that handy API object again to make another REST request to JIRA's API. This time we're going to hit the search endpoint and pass in that JQL query that we just constructed. And we're only interested in counting the number of issues returned in this response. So we'll just limit the number of fields returned to the status field for performance. So let's assign that to a variable quickly. And let's extract the total number of issues that are returned in that response. And now, in just 5 lines of code, we've got enough information to actually perform our validation logic. So we're going to see if the total number of issues that the user has in progress is less than 3, we'll allow the validation to pass. Otherwise, we'll return false to block the validation. And so the user's not left in the dark, let's put together a little error message explaining why they can't take on any more work. So we'll personalize it with the user's display name and print out the number of issues that they already have in progress. All right, so let's jump back to our terminal. And you can see it's instantly reloaded our code again. If we pop back to our Kanban board, we can try dragging another issue. And you can see that it's blocked the transition and bounced our issues back into selected for development. Awesome. So I hope that demonstrates that you can build an app in just a few lines of code that solves a real business problem. Let's jump back into the slides and look at one last example. This one's for the Confluence fans. We're going to build a Forge-powered macro. Now at Atlassian, we use Confluence for all sorts of things, including communication and collaboration and even reference documentation. One of the advantages of a wiki is that your whole team can help improve things like service documentation. Often, this is done through inline comments. Now, comments are a good lightweight way of fostering discussion and providing feedback. But they can get a bit unwieldy on busy pages because they don't have a lot of workflow to them. So we've built a feedback collector macro using Forge that allows you to leave and address feedback in a more structured manner. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a little feedback button. This is actually a Forge app. If we click it, we're presented with some fields that allow us to leave feedback on the page. Now, these fields are actually presented using Forge UI markup language, which we'll look at in just a sec. Once you submit the form, it gives you a link to the issue that was just created. And now the feedback is tracked in JIRA, where we can manage it a bit more effectively. Now, this particular Forge app also presents some sophisticated configuration options to users who can edit the page. So if we jump into edit mode and scroll down to where our macro is embedded in the page and hit the edit button by pressing the little pencil, you'll see that we get presented with a set of different options for how the feedback is filed. We can choose a project and an issue type and an assignee. And we can also choose whether we want the reporter to be attributed to the person who wrote the feedback or submit it anonymously. Now there's a few different things going on in this form. We have a couple of selects and a fairly sophisticated user picker and some radio buttons. And this is all expressed through just a few lines of Forge's declarative user experience language, Forge UI. Forge UI, again, makes development simple by supporting a collection of rich, declarative components that allow you to build a sophisticated user interface with just a few lines of code. So the three apps that we've just seen are just an example of some of the different types of extensions that Forge enables in Atlassian's cloud products today. And of course, the Forge team is hard at work building out more extension points, more tools, and more UI components to make Forge developers' lives easier. And, of course, to make your team's use of Atlassian products far more effective through rich customizations. So hopefully, I've given you a little taste of what's possible on Forge and just how simple it is to build Forge apps. We're going to keep improving the tools and making the experience simpler until just about everyone will be able to use Forge to create lightweight apps, maybe even a product manager.
Very funny, Tim. But I have to admit, there's some truth to it. Achieve more with far less code. Having confidence what I build won't open up a gaping security hole in our cloud. That is actually truly appealing to me. So to recap, we've seen that cloud extensibility is evolving rapidly, with popular server apps coming to cloud, tools to support migrations, brand new cloud integrations, and last but not least, Forge, our new cloud development platform that makes it easy to build and run secure, enterprise-ready apps on the Atlassian cloud. To help you get started, we're taking our open DNA one step further. The Forge apps that Tim just demoed, plus a ton of others, are all open source and liberally licensed, meaning that they're ready for you to copy and modify or just run SDR for your team, all for free, of course. What's left for you to do is head over to atlassian.com/forge and join hundreds of people in our beta program already to start making your cloud experience uniquely yours. We're super excited to see all the brilliant little and big things you and your team will build. Oh, and there's one more thing. If that brand new platform, getting to use cutting edge technology together with free sample apps, isn't reason enough yet for you to get started, what if I told you we're bringing back Codegeist, our hackathon for developers, offering hundreds of thousands of dollars in prizes across a wide range of different app categories, including Forge apps. You heard that right, hundreds of thousands of dollars in prizes, so absolutely stay tuned for details coming out very, very soon, and start coding today. On behalf of Tim, myself, and the entire ecosystem team here at Atlassian, thank you so much for joining this session and for being part of our community. Let's keep building awesome things together. Thank you.